we're going to talk today about adding and subtracting fractions. So for the final, you're going to need to know how to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. Again, some of the common mistakes are adding and subtracting the denominators and not changing your answers to mixed numbers or reducing. So we're going to just remember to practice that again and look at some of the common mistakes or misconceptions when you are adding and subtracting fractions. So our first one that we're going to do is 4/5 plus 1/3. And just a reminder that whenever my denominators are different, I have to make them the same. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite them up and down and then change my denominators. So I'm going to go ahead and write 4/5 plus 1/3 over here. And then I'm going to make equivalent fractions. So I'm going to set my problem up like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to make like denominators. So how I'm going to make a like denominator is I'm going to multiply my two denominators. So 5 times 3 is 15. So my new denominator here is 15, and my new denominator here is 15. So because I changed the denominators, I have to also change the numerators. So how I do that is, what did I do to 5 to make it a 15? Well, I multiplied the 5 by a 3, and 5 times 3 equals 15. So I'm going to do the same to the 4. So 4 times 3 is 12. So my equivalent fraction is 12/15. So 4/5 is the same as 12/15. So I do the same thing down here. So how did I change a 3 to make a 15? Well, I took 3 times 5, and 3 times 5 is 15. So I'm going to do the same to the numerator because I have to change it as well. So 1 times 5 is 5. So now that I can see that my denominators are the same, they're both 15ths, I can go ahead and just add my numerators. So I'm going to add 12 plus 5, and that gives me 17/15. Sorry, you have to write small. Okay? Now, before I'm finished, I have to look and ask myself, if the numerator is bigger than the denominator, I have to change it to a mixed number. So I'm going to have to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to have to take 17 divided by 15, and I can fit one of those in, and I subtract, and I get 2, and the 2 becomes my numerator over 15, and I don't have to reduce anything. Sorry, that's kind of crowded. So my final answer is going to be 1 2/15. Okay, I'll try to write this one a little smaller. So our next one is a subtraction problem. So I'm going to notice that it's got a minus sign, so I have to subtract. And I have a 4 and a 2 as a denominator, which means those are going to have to be made the same with the equivalent fractions. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite them. See if I can write smaller this time. So 3/4 minus 1/2. And I notice they have different denominators, so I'm going to multiply them to make a common denominator. So 4 times 2 equals 8. And what do I do to a 2 to get an 8? I multiply it by 4. So I'm going to multiply the top numerator by 4. 1 times 4 is 4. And that makes sense to me because half of 8 is 4, so 1/2 is the same as 4/8. What do I do to a 4? Well, I have to multiply it by 2 to get an 8. So I have to multiply both 4 times 2 to get 8 and 3 times 2 to get 6. Now that my fractions are equivalent or have the same denominator of 8, I'm going to go ahead and subtract them. So I'm going to put the 8 down here and then do 6 minus 4, which is 2. Okay. I notice the 2 is smaller than the 8, so I'm not going to do any dividing. I'm not going to change it to an improper fraction, or it's not an improper fraction, to a mixed number. But I can reduce it because I can divide both of them by the number 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my final answer is 1/4. And I'm going to write it up here. Okay. All right, on our third problem, we have an 8 and a 3. So we're going to go ahead and change the denominators again. So 1/8 plus 2/3. And I'm going to have to find a common denominator for them. So the common denominator would be 8 times 3, which is 24. So this is going to become a 24, and this is going to be a 24. And once I find the numerators, I can just add them together. So what do I do to a 3 to get a 24? Well, I multiply it by the number 8. And 3 times 8 is 24, so I'm going to do 2 times 8, which is 16. And then 8 times 3 is 24, so I do 1 times 3 is 3. And now I'm ready to go ahead and add them. So 16 plus 3, or 3 plus 16, gives me 19/24. And I know that that's my reduced answer because I can't divide 19 and 24 by 2 or by 3 or by 5 or any other number. So my final answer is 19/24. Okay? All right. Lastly, we have 4/10 minus 5, or 1/5. And so I'm going to go ahead, since the denominators are different, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite them with new denominators. Okay, and one of the easiest ways that I can do it is just multiplying these. If you know another way by using 10 as your denominator, go ahead and do that. But if you're not sure, you're going to multiply 10 times 5, which is 50. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to just multiply to get new numerators. So to get 50, I have to take 5 times 10 to get 50. So I'm going to do 1 times 10 to get my new numerator. 10 times 5 gives me 50. So I'm going to multiply 4 times 5 to get 20. And so now that my denominators are the same and I have new numerators, I'm just going to go ahead and subtract. And I want to make sure I know to subtract. So 20 minus 10 is 10 over 50. Now I know that I can reduce that because they both end in 0, so I know that they can be divided by 10 actually. And we've talked before about the trick that if something ends in zeros, you can just kind of cross those off like that. But if we divide these both by 10, you're going to wind up with 1/5. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 50 divided by 10 is 5. Now, if you go ahead and divide by 2, you're going to get 5/25, but then you're going to have to divide by 5 again. So I noticed that I can divide by 10, but if you do divide by 2, you're going to get 5/25. If you divided by 5, you would get 2/10. In the end, your final answer is going to be 1/5. So there is lots of things that you could divide these two by to get the final answer of 1/5. Okay? We are going to be practicing some more with this today. And as a quick review, just remember how to change those denominators and those numerators, and then making sure that you always look to see, do you have to reduce? Okay? Go ahead and try these 4 problems on your own, and if you need to, look up at the top. Some of the denominators are the same as they were in the problem before. Some are a little different, but then that way, this one's different, but this one you can kind of look and see what the denominator is to check it out, okay? When you're finished with this, you're going to go ahead and go onto your drive, and there'll be something for you to work on today.